My mother-in-law stood up in that courtroom, pointed at me in full dress uniform and said, "She stole every dollar my husband left me." For a second, nobody moved. The county courtroom was small, wood paneling, bad lighting, 22 people in the gallery, and I could hear every one of them breathing. My hands were flat on the defense table because I did not trust them to stay still any other way. I am Lieutenant Colonel Iris Calder, 19 years in the Army. 2 combat deployments. I have carried men who weighed more than I did across ground that was trying to kill both of us. And I was standing in a county courthouse in Marlow, Ohio, accused of stealing $240,000 from a 68-year-old widow. That widow was my husband's mother. Judge Hale looked over her gold-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Calder, sit down, please." Vera sat, slowly, the way a woman sits when she has already won and wants everyone to watch her enjoy it. I looked across the aisle at my husband. Damon was staring at the table. His tie was crooked. He hadn't shaved. He had not looked at me once in 50 minutes, and I understood then that he wasn't going to. 11 years of marriage. He couldn't lift his eyes. The prosecutor stood. "Colonel Calder, do you deny the transfers?" "I do." "All 3? "All 3. Your signature appears on all of them." And my signature was forged. Vera made a small sound. Not quite a laugh. Just enough for the front row to hear it. And behind me at the back of the courtroom, the double doors opened. I didn't turn around. I want to be honest about that. I had spent 11 weeks being ambushed by my own life, and I had stopped turning toward doors, which is why I did not see the man who walked in. I only heard the hinge and the slow, unhurried footsteps of someone who was not in a hurry, and did not have to be. To understand how I ended up there, you have to go back to a phone call at 4 in the morning. I'd been home 6 days. 14 months at a joint command post overseas, and my body still hadn't figured out which continent it lived on. I woke every night at 4 and lay there listening to the house settle around me like it belonged to someone else. That night, the phone rang before my eyes were fully open. Damon didn't move. He could sleep through anything. I used to find that comforting. "Iris." Vera's voice, thin and tight. "Something's happened." I sat up. "What's wrong?" "My accounts. They're empty." "Which accounts?" "All of them." I was in her driveway 40 minutes later. Here is the detail I noticed and then made myself forget for 11 weeks. It was 4:40 in the morning, and my mother-in-law opened the door in a cream-tailored blazer, gold brooch pinned at the collar, silver hair set, fully dressed, lipstick on. Nobody dresses like that to discover a robbery. "Show me," I said. She turned the laptop toward me. 3 wire transfers, 11 days apart, $240,000 routed to an account registered in another state. "Have you called the bank?" "I called you." "Vera, you call the bank first." I wanted family to see it first. Something in how she said family. I looked up. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was watching my face, studying it. The way you'd watch a match you'd already bet on. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "I'm not looking at you like anything," she said. Damon arrived at 6 with coffee he'd bought for himself and nobody else. He read the screen for a long, long time. And then he said the strangest thing I have ever heard my husband say. "You were the only one with the passwords." The kitchen went absolutely silent. "What?" "Mom gave you access. Before you deployed, for the property taxes." "That was 2 years ago. I never logged in. Not once." "But you had access." I stood up so fast the chair scraped. "Damon, look at me." He looked at the floor. I drove home with my hands too tight on the wheel and the sun coming up gray behind the water tower. I kept replaying it. The 4 in the morning, the blazer, the lipstick, family, she'd said, like a word she'd rehearsed. By the end of that week, there was a case number. By the end of the second, a detective was sitting on my couch with his notebook open, asking me to explain a bank login from a device registered in my name. "I don't own that device." "It's registered to you." Then somebody registered it. He wrote something down. He did not look up. That night, I opened my laptop and started building a file, the way I'd built 100 incident reports. Timestamps. IP records. Deployment orders proving I was 8,000 miles away, in a hardened facility with no personal internet access, The day the second transfer cleared, I emailed the orders to the detective at 2 in the morning and finally slept. He called 2 days later. "Ma'am, those orders you sent." "Yes." "They've been flagged." Something cold moved through my chest. "Flagged how?" "The Army can't verify them." I stood in my own kitchen holding the phone. "That's not possible. I'm just telling you what came back." I called my old command, left 3 messages. Nobody called back. 14 months of my life. The heat, the sirens, the men I'd sat with at 3 in the morning. And suddenly the United States Army could not confirm that I had been there. That was the moment I stopped being frightened and started being certain. This wasn't a mistake. Somebody had built this. Somebody with a name and access and 11 weeks of patience. I drove to Vera's house that evening. She opened the door and smiled the way she always did, thin and pleasant, like she'd been expecting me for tea. "Iris, what a surprise." "Who did you talk to?" "I have no idea what you mean." "Someone made my deployment orders disappear. That takes access. That takes a person." She stepped back to let me in, still smiling. "You've always been so dramatic." "Where's Damon?" "He's out." "His car's in the driveway." The smile didn't move a millimeter. "He's out." I turned and walked back to my car. I got in and sat there with the keys in my hand, not starting it, because my hands weren't steady enough yet. Then the curtain in the upstairs window moved. Damon was standing behind it, watching me. Our eyes met across that dark lawn, and my husband of 11 years did not step back, did not wave, did not come down. He just reached up and closed the curtain.
I sat in that driveway for 11 minutes after the curtain closed. I know it was 11 because I watched the numbers change on the dashboard clock and thought, this is what my marriage costs. 11 minutes and a piece of fabric. Then I drove to a motel on Route 9 and paid cash for 4 nights. I want to explain something about being a soldier that civilians rarely understand. We are not brave. We are prepared. Bravery is what people call it afterward when they weren't standing there. What actually happens is that you have walked the scenario so many times in your head that when the world finally comes apart, your hands already know where to go. That night, in a room that smelled like cigarettes and pine cleaner, my hands opened a notebook. I wrote 3 names: Vera, Damon, unknown. Under unknown, I wrote, has access to Army personnel records. That last one was the one that frightened me. My mother-in-law could forge a signature, my husband could stay silent, but neither of them could reach into a federal system and make 14 months of my service disappear. Somebody else was in this. The next morning I called my daughter. Nell was 20, a sophomore at a state school 4 hours north. She'd sent me a photo of her dorm room the week I deployed, and I looked at it in a plywood hut with no air conditioning until the screen burned out. "Mom?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "It's 7. I need you to listen and not panic." She was awake instantly. She always could do that. She got it from me. I told her everything, the transfers, the detective, the orders. There was a long silence. "Mom," she said, "Grandma called me 2 weeks ago." The room went very small. "What did she say?" "She said you'd been having money trouble, that you'd taken loans overseas. She said she was worried and she wanted to know if I'd noticed anything." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that was insane." Nell's voice cracked. "Mom, why would she ask me that?" "Because a case isn't just documents. It's a story, and a story needs witnesses who will one day say, well, now that you mention it, she did seem strange. She had called my daughter and tried to make her a witness. Nell, listen carefully. If she calls again, you answer. You're polite. You tell her nothing. Mom? And you write down every word and the time she said it." A pause, then very quietly, "Okay." I hung up and understood that Vera had not started this 11 days ago. She had started it a long time before that. The bank turned me down on a Tuesday. I'd requested the device registration records. The ones showing a phone in my name had accessed her account. I had the right. I was an authorized user on the property tax account. The teller typed for a while, then she stopped typing. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, your access was revoked." "When?" 11 weeks ago. 11 weeks, 3 weeks before the first transfer. I leaned on the counter. Who revoked it? I can't tell you that. Was it the account holder? She looked at her screen, then at me. She was maybe 24, and she was being asked right then to decide something. I really can't say, she said. And then, after a moment, but it wasn't done in a branch, it was done over the phone, which meant a voice, which meant a recording. Thank you. I didn't tell you anything. No, I agreed. You didn't. I got a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Dahlia Frost. Her office sat above a dry cleaner, and she had a coffee stain shaped like Portugal on her blotter. She listened for 40 minutes without writing a word. Then she said, Colonel, I'm going to ask you an ugly question. Ask it. Is there any chance your husband did this and his mother is covering for him? I made myself think about it honestly. No, I said. Damon doesn't have the nerve to steal. He has the nerve to stand behind a curtain. Dahlia nodded slowly. Then somebody's using him. They arrested me on a Thursday. I want to describe this accurately because I've watched people describe it wrong on television my entire life. It was not dramatic. 2 young deputies came to the motel. One of them recognized my uniform and could not look at me. They said my name. They asked if I had a weapon on my person and I said no, and if there was one in the room and I said one secured and told them exactly where, and I did not move until they told me I could. They did not put my hands behind my back. That was a courtesy. I noticed it. I have thought about it many times since. I was processed in 80 minutes and released on my own recognizance because I had 19 years of service and no record, and a lawyer who arrived with a folder. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain. Dahlia lit a cigarette and didn't smoke it. They're going to offer you a plea. I won't take it. Probation, restitution, no felony. I won't take it. She looked at me sideways. Most people take it. Most people didn't spend 19 years being told that what you sign, you mean? She crushed the cigarette on the step, put the butt in her pocket, and I liked her very much in that moment. Then we fight, she said. But Colonel, we need whoever wiped your orders. Without those orders, you have no alibi for the second transfer. And without an alibi, you're just a woman with the passwords. I found him by accident. That's the part nobody believes. There was no brilliant deduction. There was a Tuesday, and a diner on the edge of town, and I was eating eggs I couldn't taste when I heard a man 2 booths behind me say the word, Kandahar. I turned around, 59 maybe, broad, weathered face, steel gray hair cut close, thick gray mustache, black suit off the rack, and a small silver pin on his lapel that I recognized instantly, because I have one in a drawer at home. Army Criminal Investigation Division. Retired. He was on the phone. Yeah, well, the file's clean now, he said. Told you it would be. Everything in me went still. I did not confront him. That's the difference between anger and training. I paid my check. I walked to the parking lot. I wrote down his plate, the color of his tie, and the exact time on the diner clock, and my hands were perfectly steady because finally there was something to do. I sent the plate to Dahlia. She called back in 90 minutes. Iris. Her voice had changed. Where did you get this? A diner. His name is Elias Warwick, retired CID 26 years. Private investigative work now. A pause. Iris. He's on the prosecution's witness list. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. He's their expert, she said quietly. He's the man who's going to take the stand and testify that your deployment orders cannot be authenticated. The man who erased my alibi was going to be called to explain why my alibi didn't exist. I went home that night, not to the motel, to my own house. Damon's car was in the driveway. I unlocked my own front door with my own key and walked into my own kitchen and found my husband sitting at the table with a glass of something brown in front of him. He hadn't turned the overhead light on. He was sitting in the dark with a glass. He looked up. He had aged 5 years in 11 weeks. Iris, don't. He set the glass down carefully, like it might go off. I stayed standing. I'm going to ask you one question, Damon, then I'm going to leave, and how you answer decides everything for the rest of your life. He nodded. He couldn't speak. Did you know she was going to do it? The clock on the stove hummed. A car went past outside. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and stopped. And my husband, who I met at a wedding in Cincinnati when I was 29 and he was 32, and he made me laugh so hard I spilled wine on a stranger, finally looked me in the eyes. She said nobody would get hurt, he whispered. The floor did not open. Nothing fell. That's what I remember most. How ordinary the kitchen stayed while my life finished. Nobody would get hurt, I repeated. It was about the house. His voice came apart. Dad's house. She said if we ever divorced, you'd take half. She wanted it protected. She said if you had a felony, you couldn't. He stopped. You wouldn't get anything. $240,000, Damon. It never left. I did not move. Iris. He was crying now, openly, badly. It never left. It went to an account she opened. It's still sitting there. She moved her own money to frame you, and it never went anywhere. I put both hands on the back of a chair because I needed to hold something. Then say that, I said. In court, under oath, say exactly that. And Damon Calder looked down at the table and said the sentence that ended us. She's my mother. I did not shout. I want that on the record because there is a story people tell about women like me, and it always ends with us screaming. I didn't scream. I stood in my kitchen and looked at a man I had loved for 11 years and felt something go quiet inside me, like a light switched off in a room you're leaving anyway. All right, I said. He looked up, hopeful. That was the worst part of the whole night. He thought all right meant forgiveness. Damon, I said, you just told me where the money is. The hope drained out of his face like water out of a sink. I walked out of my house. I did not slam the door. You slam a door when you still want a reaction. Dahlia filed for the deposition 3 days later. Damon did not appear. His attorney sent a letter invoking spousal privilege. It is a real thing. It exists. And I had never once in 11 years considered that it would be used against me by the person who had promised to stand beside me. He can't be forced to testify against you, Dahlia explained, and he's choosing not to testify for you. He's hiding inside the marriage. Subpoena the account. I need a name, or a number, or probable cause a judge will sign. He told me it exists. He told you in your kitchen with no witnesses. She pushed her glasses up. In a courtroom, that's just you saying it. I stood at her window and looked down at the dry cleaner's sign, and the letters had faded so badly you could only read half of them. Then I need Warwick, I said. Dahlia went very still. He is their witness. He's their witness because they think he'll say what they want him to say. I turned around. But a man who spends 26 years in CID and then wipes a colonel's file for a woman like Vera Calder didn't do it for money. How could you possibly know that? Because if he'd done it for money, he'd have hidden better than a booth at a diner. I sat down slowly. He wanted to be found. Dahlia stared at me for a long moment. That, she said, is either the smartest thing I've heard all year, or you're about to hand the prosecution their entire case wrapped in a bow. I called him at 9 that night, from a motel parking lot with the engine off and the windows down and moths beating themselves against the light above the ice machine. He picked up on the second ring, like he'd been waiting 11 weeks for the phone to do exactly that. Warwick, this is Lieutenant Colonel Iris Calder. Silence. It went on so long I pulled the phone away to check the screen. Then Elias Warwick let out a breath, slow, heavy, the breath of a man setting down something he had carried too far, and said the thing I have never forgotten. Ma'am, he said, I was starting to think you weren't going to call. I gripped the wheel with my free hand. You erased my orders. Yes, ma'am, I did. No hesitation, no excuse, just yes. Why? Because I was asked to. By Vera Calder, a pause. By the person paying Vera Calder's attorney. Something cold slid down my spine. Say that again. Colonel? He sounded tired in a way I recognized. The specific exhaustion of a man who has spent his life inside systems. Your mother-in-law is 68 years old. She lives on a widow's pension, and her lawyer bills $400 an hour. Ask yourself who's writing that check. I sat in the dark and did the arithmetic and did not like the answer. There's a third party, I said. There's always a third party. Who? Not on a phone. I heard him move, a chair, a window opening. Ma'am, he said. I did 26 years. I put people in prison who deserved it. And a year ago, I retired, and I discovered that a man with a badge and no oath is just a man for hire. He was quiet a moment. I've done 4 of these. Yours is the first one where I looked up the person I was erasing. I didn't speak. 2 combat tours, he said. A Bronze Star with V device. And a citation from a village outside Kandahar that took me an hour to read because I kept stopping. Mr. Warwick, I have a daughter your daughter's age. The moths kept hitting the light. The ice machine cycled and went quiet. They put me on the witness list, he said. They're going to stand me up in that courtroom and have me swear that your service can't be verified. He laughed once, with no humor at all. They've never asked me what I'd say if somebody asked the right question. I closed my eyes. What's the right question? Ma'am, said Elias Warwick, you're a smart woman and you called me at 9 at night. You already know. I did. I asked it anyway because some things you have to say out loud in an empty parking lot before you can say them in a courtroom. Will you testify? There was a very long silence on that line, long enough that I heard a train somewhere, far off, going the other way. No, he said. And before I could answer, before the floor could drop out again, he added, Not for you, Colonel. I'll testify because I want to be able to look at my own daughter. A pause. But you need to understand something first. Understand what? The person paying for this, he said slowly, isn't Vera. And she isn't the one who wanted you in a courtroom. I opened my eyes. Then who did? And Warwick told me. The name he said was not one I expected, and for 3 seconds I honestly thought I'd misheard him. Say it again. Colonel Marcus Red. The night went very still around the car. That's not possible. I have his signature on a retainer agreement, Warwick said. Not Vera's. His. Marcus Red had been my battalion commander for 2 years. He'd handed me my oak leaves in a dusty motor pool with a photographer nobody had asked for. He'd shaken my hand and said, Calder, you're the finest officer I've got, and let me tell you, I believed him. Why? I said. My voice came out strange. He retired. He's a civilian. He has nothing to do with my marriage. Ma'am. Warwick's voice was careful now. The way you speak to somebody standing near an edge. Do you remember filing an Inspector General complaint 14 months ago? Everything in my body went cold. I did remember. Of course I remembered. I had sat in a plywood office at a joint command post with a sergeant across from me who had a broken wrist and a story about a promotion board, and I had listened to that story for 2 hours, and then I had done what an officer is supposed to do. I wrote it down, I signed it, I sent it up. I had never heard another word about it. That complaint went nowhere, I said. That complaint is scheduled for review next spring, Warwick said. It went somewhere, Colonel. It just went slowly. The moths kept beating themselves against the light. And a witness with a felony conviction, I said, can't testify. A witness with a felony conviction, Warwick agreed quietly, is a liar with a motive. That's all a lawyer needs. I put my forehead against the steering wheel. $240,000. My husband's silence. My mother-in-law's 4 in the morning blazer. A device registered in my name. 14 months of my life erased from a federal system. None of it had ever been about the house. It had never been about the money. It had been about making sure that when I walked into a room next spring and opened my mouth, I would be a convicted felon and every word out of me would be worth exactly nothing. Vera Calder hadn't planned any of this. She'd been handed it. She thinks she's protecting her son's inheritance, I said slowly. She thinks she found a lawyer who works cheap, said Warwick. She has no idea whose war she's fighting. I sat in that parking lot until 2 in the morning, not thinking. That's the strange part. The thinking was already done. What I was doing was something else, something I hadn't done since a road outside Kandahar with smoke so thick it ate the sun. I was letting the fear finish. You cannot fight while you're afraid, but you also cannot skip it. It has to move through you, all the way through, like weather. So I sat there and I let it come, and I thought about Nell in her dorm room 4 hours north. And I thought about the sergeant with the broken wrist whose name I still say in my head sometimes. And I thought about Damon standing behind a curtain. And around 1:30 in the morning, the fear finished. What was left underneath it was very quiet and very clear. And I recognized it immediately, because it is the only thing I have ever been able to rely on completely. I picked up the phone and called Dahlia Frost. She answered on the fourth ring, furious. "It's 2 a.m. Take the plea meeting." Silence. "Iris? Set it for Friday. Tell them I'm considering. Tell them I'm frightened and I'm tired and I want to know what probation would look like." Dahlia was quiet for a long moment. "Are you?" "No," I said. "But whoever's paying Vera's lawyer is going to be told that I am, and a man who thinks he's already won stops watching the door." I heard her sit up in bed. "Colonel," she said slowly, "what exactly are you doing?" I looked out at the empty highway. "I spent 19 years learning that you don't take the hill in front of you," I said. "You take the one they left unguarded." Friday morning, in a conference room with bad carpet, I sat across from the prosecutor and let my hands shake. That is the only lie I told in this entire story, and I am not sorry for it. I let my voice go thin. I asked about restitution schedules. I asked whether a felony would affect my pension, and when he said it would, I looked down at the table for 4 full seconds. Behind him in the corner, Vera's attorney sat with his legs crossed and watched me the way a man watches a horse he has already bet against. His suit cost more than my car. "Colonel," the prosecutor said, not unkindly, "I want you to understand. If this goes to trial and we prove those transfers, you're looking at 3 to 5. I understand. Take the weekend." "I'll take the weekend," I said. And as I stood to go, Vera's attorney uncrossed his legs and said, pleasantly, "It's the right decision. Nobody wants to see a woman like you humiliated in public." I stopped. I turned around and I looked at him and I let him see nothing at all. In my face. "No," I agreed. "Nobody does." Warwick met me in a church parking lot on Sunday because he said churches have no cameras and everybody looks like they belong. He handed me a manila envelope. "The retainer agreement," he said. "The wire instructions for the account your husband told you about. And the recording of the phone call that revoked your bank access." I opened it. My hands were steady. "Whose voice is on the recording?" "Vera's." He paused. "Reading a script somebody wrote for her. You can hear the pages turn." I looked up at him. 59 years old, standing in a parking lot in a cheap black suit, handing me his entire retirement, his license, and probably his freedom. "Mr. Warwick, if you give me this, you're a defendant too." "Yes, ma'am. You understand that." "I've understood it for 11 weeks. He put his hands in his pockets and looked at the church. "Colonel, I destroyed your record. There's no version of this where I walk away clean. There's only a version where I'm the man who fixed it and a version where I'm the man who didn't." Wind moved across the lot. "Why now?" I asked. He was quiet a while. "Because you called me," he said. "Nobody I've ever done this to called me. They all just went to prison." The trial started on a Tuesday in October. Dahlia and I did not put Warwick on our witness list. We didn't file the envelope. We didn't move to dismiss. We let them believe I was a woman who had been offered probation and refused it out of stubbornness. We let them call their witnesses. And on the 3rd morning, the prosecutor stood up and said the words we had waited 11 weeks to hear. "The state calls Mr. Elias Warwick." Across the aisle, Vera Calder smiled and folded her hands. Behind her, in the 3rd row, a man in a suit that cost more than my car leaned forward, and Warwick walked past me to the stand without turning his head and put his hand on the book and swore to tell the truth. Warwick sat down. The prosecutor smiled. "Mr. Warwick, you examined the defendant's deployment orders." "I did." "Can the Army authenticate them?" "No, sir." Vera's smile widened. "Tell the court why." Warwick looked at the judge, then for the first time at me. "Because I deleted them," he said. The courtroom made a sound I have never heard before or since. The prosecutor's mouth stayed open. Judge Hale set down her pen. Behind Vera, the man in the expensive suit stood halfway up, then sat back down as if his knees had failed. "Mr. Warwick," Judge Hale said, "do you understand what you just said under oath?" "Yes, ma'am. I was paid to erase Colonel Calder's service record so she'd be uncorroborated at trial. I have the retainer. It isn't signed by Vera Calder." Vera turned around, confused for the first time in her life. What is he talking about? Nobody answered her. I was paid by Colonel Marcus Red, retired. Warwick set an envelope on the rail. The subject of an Inspector General complaint, Colonel Calder, filed 14 months ago. Review scheduled for April. A felony conviction would have made her testimony inadmissible. Judge Hale removed her glasses. You've just confessed to a federal crime in my courtroom. Yes, ma'am. Why? He was quiet a moment. Because I spent 26 years telling people the truth matters more than what it costs them, he said. I'd like to find out if I meant it. The money was recovered in 9 days. It had never left the state. Vera had opened the account herself in a strip mall branch wearing the cream blazer. Her attorney was disbarred. Marcus Red was arraigned in March, and I sat in the gallery and did not look at him once. The Inspector General review went forward in April. I testified for 6 hours. The sergeant with the broken wrist testified after me, and afterward he shook my hand in the hallway and couldn't say anything at all. Neither could I. Elias Warwick served 11 months. I visited him twice. Damon signed the papers without looking up. He said he was sorry, and I believed him. Regret and repair are not the same country, and he never once bought a ticket. Vera called me one time in February. I let it ring. Nell graduated in the spring. I sat in the 4th row in dress uniform. She found me from the stage and didn't wave, just held my eyes for a second. That was better. Afterward, she said, "You never once told me to be quiet." I said, "I never once wanted you to be. They don't always come for you with violence. Sometimes they come with paperwork. Sometimes the person who ends you is standing behind a curtain, and the one who saves you is a stranger in a diner who says a word you recognize. The record they try to erase is never the one that matters. The one that matters is the one you keep by refusing, every single day, to sign your name to a lie. If someone once told the truth for you when it cost them everything, think of them today. And if this story found you at the right moment, stay a while."